Welcome, everybody, to either Timeline Traveller Tarot or to Tao Druidry or to Cosmic Trish Tarot and Astrology, depending upon which of our three channels you're actually watching this discussion. Welcome to the discussion. We're thrilled to have you here. This is a beginning, I hope, of a series where we build a community across channels and also with people from our community that come to view our particular channels who don't have a channel but would be like to be part of the conversation. So right from the beginning in this, I want to give out an invitation to people to let one of us know, whoever's channel you watch it on, if you would be interested in being part of a conversation in the future. Because the idea of this, it's an idea that Ryan and I had for quite a while, from when we first did a collaboration between my other channel, Eye of the Serpent Tarot, and his channel, in terms of doing readings. Like I do picker cards and he does I Ching readings. And we talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. And then when I started Timeline Traveller Tarot, we decided to have a conversation off the back of a collective reading that I'd done about big astrological changes and the growth of AI and what that might mean for the world, for humanity, for spirituality, all of those sorts of things. And at the end of that, we did invite people to get in touch. And three people have been in touch. One is the wonderful Trish, who you will be meeting properly today, if you, apart from those who are going to her channel who've already met her. And she and I have been talking a bit before this, but she was very interested in this conversation. Another is a woman called Ankh, who Ryan and I will be talking with later this week. So you'll see something coming off that in the not too distant future. And also, I just want to put a message out. There's someone who on my channel said they'd be interested in being part of the conversation, and I said, email me. If you've tried to email me and you're that person, I haven't received it, and I have been checking spam. So if you're having any trouble at all, you can go to my Etsy store and message. You don't have to buy anything at Etsy to message. You can just message me direct, and that gets past the risk of spam and emails getting lost in the ether, because we'd love to have you as part of the conversation and anybody else who might want to. So I don't think the only topic we're ever going to talk about is AI, spirituality, what we can create, and all of those sort of things. But that's been a good sort of launching pad for this sort of conversation. And so today we're going to be having a look at that in a little bit more detail, coming off the reading that Ryan and I did in the last conversation that said, don't be just reactive or in fear. Think about what you can create. And I think we're going to try and contextualize this. Like what is the context we'd be doing that in? What do we need to be aware of spiritually and otherwise? And then what the next steps might be. And we might get through all of that in this discussion, or we may have a part two or a part three. We'll just see what happens. But maybe to get things going, want to throw to Trish. So Trish is an amazing creator of Oracle and Tarot decks. That's how I found her.
Mm.
Like I was literally thinking, it's very interesting. I was literally thinking about whether or not to do this channel, this second channel. And I was kind of line ball about it, to be honest. And then one day I just turned on YouTube in my recommendations, one of her readings using one of her decks that shows world events. It's her predictions deck,
Mm.
was on, and I just thought, oh, I love that deck. I've got to get it. So I got in touch with her, as I always do. I always like to ask creators for their permission to use their decks. It turned out she was a fellow Aussie, which is really exciting for me.
Mhm.
And she was very kindly allowed me to use the deck and so forth. And then over, I think it would have been about a week or two while I'd ordered the decks and the decks had arrived. I was thinking about the title for my channel, and I was thinking Timeline Traveler, and then again there was a recommendation from Trish for a reading she was doing on timelines, and I thought, oh, this is getting all a bit
Mm.
spooky. And then she was talking in that about an amazing meditation that she did, which I'm going to ask her to talk about. But one of the things that did jump out to me is that there was a serpent in it, and my main channel is Eye of the Serpent Tarot. So I wrote to Trish and I said, you know what? I think there's something here. I don't know what it is. Make of it what you will, and the rest is history. But she's got some really interesting stories about that, where she can show you some cards from a deck that she's currently creating that connects to some of that meditation, I think, and other things. And then also, there's a beautiful new deck, Neptune Moon, that will be coming out soon. I'm hanging out for that one,
Yeah.
which we will ask her to use as part of this discussion today. So, without me wanting to rave on anymore, I see my role a lot in this around bringing people together and coming up with some topics sometimes and that sort of thing, though it may depend on the topic. But I think with Trish and with Ryan, we've got some people who've thought really deeply about this sort of thing. And I'd really like to kind of hand over more to them. So, Trish, if you want to tell us about the synchronicities, that connection, and how you use that deck to even think about framing this. And then maybe after that, Ryan, you can talk about what you'd like to talk about, and then we can let the conversation flow. So, over to
Beautiful.
Trish.
Thank you so much, Helen. Great to be here. Nice to meet everybody on your channel, Helen, as well as yours, Ryan. And all the beautiful community of just really enlightened souls, really wanting to expand their vision, expand their knowledge, and dive deeply with sacred knowledge. So that's the thing with our synchronicity that we had. The serpent knowledge is very sacred wisdom, sacred knowledge. A lot, and you'll notice if you go through different cultures, they all have serpent beings. Now, you'd be much more versed on this, Helen, than what I am. I've started learning since this meditation that I had. So, the timeline, how it plays for me with our synchronicities is that I had this meditation. So, I will show you the picture of the meditation. I was started off with a vision of a large serpent confronting me. And this was an image that I created. So this serpent was right in my face. I had no fear at all. Wasn't scared of him. And I know we have a lot of snakes here in Australia, so it's confronting if you have a snake in your backyard. But I had no
Yes.
fear at all. He was assessing me. He was assessing my intentions, I guess, when it comes to delving deeper into how far they were going to take me in this meditation. So I must have passed some kind of test because they took me through further into the meditation. Now, this is not just a one-off meditation that I had. I was sitting with other people. And one of the friends that I was sitting with, she had the exact same meditation. It wasn't guided to be this meditation, but we saw the same things. And we both saw serpents. She saw the serpent wrapped around a staff, which is funny. We talked about staffs too, Ryan. But she saw the serpent wrapped around the staff, and I saw the serpent at the gate assessing me on what my intentions were. And in my view of the meditation that I had, I was at a control panel and I had a Thoth like being watching over me while I was controlling the level of moving a dial on how much, I guess, enlightenment or control that we actually have over what we can do. So he said, don't move it too far. I wanted to push it to the top, but he suggested don't do that. He said it will cause temporal headaches. And we both came out of the meditation for 2 days. We had headaches for 2 days.
Wow.
The energy was so incredibly powerful. I did talk about it on my channel, on my Cosmic channel, straight after the meditation. I did a reading so I could, or a video, so I could capture that moment. Now, the synchronicities occur because of that friend and I that had the same meditation, we sat down at the computer to start creating the artwork for it because we wanted to do it while it was fresh. And at that exact moment that we were creating the art pieces, the serpent in particular, Helen, that's when I got your email
Yeah. Yeah.
about the synchronicities, about the timelines, about the serpent. You'd watch the meditation. It was probably a week or two, maybe a week after the meditation video that I started with the art piece, and it was right about the time that you contacted me. So I
Oh,
thought, well,
wow.
that's a synchronicity as well. You're emailing me about the synchronicities that you're experiencing with this experience at the exact time. It's a synchronicity while I'm creating that serpent, and your channel is the eye of the serpent, and I'm creating a serpent, and you're telling me about the synchronicity. So really quite profound experience.
Mm.
The meditation was profound, the experience was profound in a whole, and it just made it felt like we don't know why we're supposed to come together.
Yep.
There's no clue. We just know with all the synchronicities, you cannot ignore the flow of the universe. The universe obviously wants us to do something together, so we said let's just open up and just see where it goes. So I'll talk very briefly about the Neptune Moon deck.
Yes.
So now on my channel, on the Cosmic Trish Tarot Astrology channel, I do a lot of cosmic card reading. So this is my Neptune Moon deck. This one is being ordered at the moment and will be in August. August, we're going to have a limited edition of this deck.
Wonderful.
So it's for these type of topics. So anybody watching this video, this is exactly who it's made for. So lots of beautiful energy cards here. We've got Thoth in there. We've got Mercury, the messenger, just running polar duality. Hermetic principles are also in this, sacred geometry. It will change just really slightly. We've got a serpent coming up next. We've got the serpent card there. So there's quite a few really beautiful cards. I won't do a complete
Mhm.
all about harnessing power, but all the topics that we're talking about. And I just wanted to say how I'm introduced to Ryan is that I was watching your channel with your collaborations and I was watching you and Ryan and I'm like, so much of that stuff just aligns to the readings that I do using the Neptune
Mm.
Moon deck. And it just feels like there's something more, like there's something bigger. And I was just so aligned to it. And we were having a little chat just before we come onto the live about collective consciousness, I call it the source field, but there's many different names for it, and how you can tap into that. And Ryan said it's like a large brain, and that's how I visualize it and I see the strands of it. But it made me think when you were talking about the non-duality in your last video, I felt, are we connected by the not the that realm, that field that has, I mean, they
Mm.
call it different things. So I'm just curious, Ryan, how you feel, given that you were talking about that, how we're all connected. They say we're all one. Is it through that kind of realm, through that source field, that source connection, that mind of the all? What's your thoughts on that? I'm just curious.
There's a book I have on my shelf called Many Rivers, One Well, I think it is. I've forgotten the author, but that's my perspective of it, is that we all have this well within us that goes to the exact same source. Um,
Hmm.
and oftentimes I think in spirituality, we envision, the enlightening effect being something that elevates us upward. Um, but in the I Ching, I've found that the real juiciness, as it were, is from going within very, very deeply. And it talks about that source being at the bottom of a deep, dark well. And even talking about it in those terms, kind of, you can almost taste it in the back of your mouth. That sort of sense that we all have, that anything that we say, it's not going to really matter, honestly, because it's really, in my opinion, whether or not um, we sense that, and really any kind of planning for the future. And I like what you said about the different transits that are going on, being
Mm.
that of dissolving spiritual identities and rote patterns and things that we do that we picture ourselves as. Um, but basically, with these various rivers and having access to this one well that we each have, it becomes more of less being distracted by all the things going on externally, and more immediate importance being put on accessing each of our own internal wells. And in the I Ching and through a lot of the commentators that I look at it through, it very much puts the power in each person's individual hands to do that. And we all have egos, so it's easy to try and grab the attention and try and elevate that, um, and feel like we have a source that someone else doesn't have access to. But that, I think, is part of the problem, is that we're seeing through that a bit, that you can't have all of the elements of the spectrum if all elements are forced to follow one element's idea of, ideal life and how that might
Hmm.
function. So I feel as though, the flow of the Tao and spirit, or what you might call it, the force, uh, it kind of, I imagine it to have this sort of cyclical nature about it. And through divination, as I'm sure both of you are well acquainted with, you start to sense things that are going on more in kind of an intuitive way that you wouldn't necessarily even be able to put into words. But that, in my experience of it, has always been something that is in favor of the expansion of human consciousness and for the best outcome, especially looking at it in terms of through the Taoist perspective and the words that the I Ching uses and the Tao Te Ching, very much elevating the idea of the sage. And it's not it's all words, so it doesn't really matter that it's Taoism per se. But I like the fact that all of these kind of traditions, when you peel the layers back, they peel their own layers back and say that uh, it's almost like a finger pointing to the moon, but you have to almost at a certain point break the finger completely off. And that I think is really where we're going in my perspective and how we will achieve a certain amount of flow and a kind of uh, interconnectedness and that feel of things just sort of flowing as they're flowing through us and less resistance to that I think is definitely necessary. In I Ching terms, it also talks about to be filled, you must first be open. And so it definitely emphasizes that quality and that well-like space. And it very much puts the ball in each individual's court to access that themselves.
So just listening to both of you, it's really interesting. And I knew this would happen. I'll go off in a direction of what we thought, but I'm just sort of like kind of visualizing this because one of the things that strikes me about what you said, Ryan, is in some ways how similar, when you're talking about words, how similar comparative mystical traditions are, or whatever. Because when you're talking about the deep dark well, it makes me think I am very drawn to the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. But above the Tree of Life is a thing called Ein Sof and Ein Sof Or, and effectively it's like a deep dark well because it is the thing that characterizes it is no thingness. So it is the kind of like so not nothingness, but
Mm,
no
mm,
thingness. And then what I think is interesting about what you're saying about that and using the flow of that, but also Trish, how you were describing, connecting to the collective. When I think of the collective, I almost think of like lots of things, like almost like everything in a way. So there's like the on one level there's the no thingness, which is the preemptive energy before thingness occurs. But that collective unconscious is sort of something that we can tap into when we get things like morphic resonance, where the same idea comes up in a number of places at the same time in the world. But it sort of strikes me, I'm listening to that, and I might be putting a conceptual framework, Ryan, on what you're saying, or Trish, what you're saying, that isn't what you meant. But I just wanted to kind of explore that around kind of, as I say, the similarity of kind of comparative religion, comparative spirituality, and so forth, and almost the wonder that it is that all cultures seem to kind of come to the same place, which to me is quite hopeful for the concept of doing something. I don't know, I'm kind of like free forming this, but either of you, what does that make you think?
Well, sorry, Ryan, my thoughts on that is I come and relating to the no thingness. I come in through Hermetic principles. That's
Uh-huh.
where my interest lies
Mm-hmm.
in the seven Hermetic principles. And the principle of mentalism is that the mind is all. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing outside of the mind. So, and that kind of relates to that whole collective consciousness being the mind, the source mind, like the mind of all. And there's nothing outside of that. It's just all thought. It all comes from thought. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
thoughts are so powerful in manifestation
Yeah.
and creation and our ability to co-create together. So and that's very interesting, as you said, how different philosophies and principles all really stem back when you peel back the layers too, as you said, Ryan, peel them all back, they really come back to this core essence that it is very similar across the board.
Mm.
Mm,
Definitely. I think with a sort of sense of that, and that we all have maybe an incredibly large amount of control over where this is headed, just in general at any given stage of humanity. And maybe the idea that we're kind of fumbling that a little bit and kind of, just anybody that is growing up learns through experiencing pain not to do something over and over and over again, but sometimes some people have a harder time with those lessons than others. And maybe in a collective sense, that's what we're doing is um, maybe it's just the clinging on of old habits but I think really to get our feet underneath us, we need to have something firm to stand on, obviously, or in this case, the dissolving of the idea that there is a firm thing potentially might be that. And maybe that means that you can't guess where it's going in a sense. You have to be ready with your bags packed and at the call, so to speak, move with that flow. And I don't want to put it in terms of doing anything drastic and just letting any voice in your head steer you. But I mean that sense that you have when you get a sense of that, the flow, so to speak, or the Tao. That
Synchronicities too.
Mm.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm.
exactly. And so I like what you said, Trish, is how synchronistically this all came together and opening up the space for just who knows, none of us really know what's going on. In fact, when um, Helen and I first spoke, there was this sort of sense that there needed to be a gathering of sorts, but we didn't necessarily know what that would even look like. And we felt it important not to too much over classify it or describe it because we've had a sense that it was potentially going to be something larger than we could even imagine at that time. Not to sound grandiose, but I think everyone really, if we're all connected on a level that's deeper than skin, uh, it doesn't have to be through anybody's channel or this video or anything. If we all were able to kind of access that, I think that the right sort of things would happen uh, when they were supposed to happen that planning couldn't account for. Uh, and I guess part of that is distinguishing in I Ching terms between the human mentality and the mind of Tao, so to speak,
Mm.
and
Mm.
kind of sensing the difference between those two. Because what all of us have happen often is when we're triggered or shocked about the ongoings of world events, that we're triggered into the space of the human mentality, or you might call it the lizard brain, so to speak.
Mm.
Or
And
fear-based energy.
yeah,
Mm.
and so in that space, it's very difficult to sense your interconnectedness with all things because you have this skin and flesh that you need to protect and your little circle of influence and all of those things but if we're able to come out of the woodwork as it were and really reach out and connect and you know consciously bridge those quote unquote gaps that really are not gaps if we all have that well um, but just to kind of change the focus a bit to less reactionary living and more that space that Helen and I talked about in the Timeline Traveler Tarot collaboration we did that, this is kicking off of that sense of being kind of in an open playground. And with what the transits that you brought up, Trish, that are going on in an astronomical sense, it feels like that's very much the space that we're in.
Mm.
And so I don't know what's happening, obviously, but it feels like it is kind of in that realm.
I
Shifting.
think
Yeah.
more and more too, even in this conversation, I'm feeling like the key to all this is community
Yeah,
because to access that and to get a similar sort of focus on, I mean, you don't have to agree on everything, is that maximum negotiation that you don't have to agree on everything. You just have to agree on one thing. So, like, maybe if we all agree that, like, humanity growing and evolving and kindness and that kind of thing occurring, you can build from that, and then you get a broader group of people together, just bringing different perspectives, experience, learnings, or whatever. You have, I mean, I often talk on my channel and picker cards about the Gestalt effect, the concept of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So everybody bringing different things, spreading that out, because with picking up what you were saying, Trish, about like the hermetic principles and the kind of, in a sense, the realm of the mental or whatever. One of the things that I've always struggled with manifestation as a concept is, doesn't everybody's thoughts cancel each other's out in a way? And then also, like, if we are living in an AI and otherwise algorithmically run world where we're kind of increasingly pushed down like narrow corridors to only hear one set of opinions, then it's very hard to get that community. And whether that's a design fault or whether it's a design feature, I'm not really
Yeah.
sure. But it's like understanding what that is and how that's affecting us, but seeing, and again, it's a bit like, even like the instinct that we had that this should go on all our channels, because we have different people that come to our different channels, and it's like, it's not about whose channel is going to get the most views or any of that. Doesn't matter. What matters is getting the message out, seeing who's interested, building a community, because that's about the only way to break past what, as I say, could be a design feature to keep us separate.
Well, Helen, I've got to totally agree with you because about, and aligns as well to what you're saying, Ryan, as well, when it comes to the current power structure. And this leads into the astrological events that are changing and showing a shift. Now, the current structure that we've come up in is very much a control structure. We're being controlled. It's been that designed structure where they will put fear-based energy out there. They'll have that division between the people, the masses. They'll have us, again, with religion, politics, all different kinds of things. Now, where we're coming in through three different modalities, we're able to see that at the core of it, they're all aligned to the same thing. And really so what's happened to this, the philosophies, religions, politics, whatever it is, it could possibly be an intentional
Mm.
way to put the masses against each other, because when we're fighting against each other, we're not aligning to our true
Yep.
depth of our own power. And what I feel, and I say power in a very kind of loose way, not power like power structures. I say it in what our abilities are, our innate abilities to be able to tap in, co-create, to manifest, all of those kind of things, the practical things we all know about. But the biggest things that's happening in astrology, they're massive right now. There's a change happening, and you have both talked about the astrological point of it, but I'll drop the names of the planets so
Go
we
for
know
it.
what exactly is going on right now. Now, the first thing that has happened, which I didn't list when we talked about it, was Pluto moved into Aquarius. It moved out of Capricorn. Capricorn, of course, represents power structures,
Mm-hmm.
governments, the status quo, the system, pretty much. And Aquarius represents the people. You think of the age of Aquarius. So you think of power returning back to the people. And I say, and I'm loosely using the term power for the want of a better word, but the power and the energy, I guess, returning back to the people through Pluto. Now, Pluto represents change and transformation, death of the old system to make way for the new system. Now, the three out of planets, they're slower moving. They stay in their positions
Mm-hmm.
for many years. Pluto, 20 years, it's going to
Yep.
be in Aquarius. So this is going to take place over the next decade or two. The other two big major out of planets that have an effect on, now the inner planets have an effect on us on a soul, like on a kind of basic soul person. I mean, individual person has an effect, but the outer planets, they affect the community, they affect the generations. And all three big planets, outer planets, have moved. So Neptune recently moved from Pisces into Aries. And the other one that's just happened last week, just as we've been in talks about this collaboration and, what needs to happen, we've had Uranus move into Gemini.
Yep.
Uranus is all about awakening. It's about the planet of kind of like disruption, just disrupting the status quo, disrupting the power structure, being able to think outside of the box, beyond yourself as a community. So that's the big three outer planets, all have moved recently, and it's showing this energy of shift that's coming.
Mm.
And I think that's what we're all picking up on.
Very much so. Very
Mm.
much so. And particularly at the moment, for anybody who knows their charts, if they have, planets in the early degrees, because
Mm.
they're all going, they will be aspected in one form or another, whether it's conjunct, opposite, trine, or whatever it might be. But yeah, it's very big
Yeah.
stuff.
I'm
Um,
2 degrees Aquarius ascendant, so it hit me and it's hit me hard.
yep.
But yeah, I was very drawn to just go with the flow, and so I didn't really have to fight against it. So Pluto hit Aquarius, and Pluto is a planet of change and transformation. So it can be quite scary when you don't want to follow the flow of the universe. If you want to fight against it, it's going to fight you back.
Yeah, it's like a
Yeah.
tower card.
It
Like
is
Uranus is a bit like that as well too.
Tower Death card.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, kind
yes,
of like that. I've
yep,
got it.
together.
Pluto's been hitting my south node and my vertex, so
Oh, yep.
it's hitting me pretty hard as well too. So
Mm.
I don't know
But
your chart,
ultimately for the
right?
better, for the better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully, yeah.
Mm.
I'm a Sun, Cancer, Moon, Scorpio, and Gemini rising,
So
and then
Gemini,
Ah,
a bunch
yeah,
of other
ah,
stuff.
yeah.
Both Gemini rising, and I'm a Gemini sun.
There you go.
Mm, mm.
That's awesome. Oh wow.
No wonder we wanted to get together for a
Yeah,
chat.
which is ruled by Mercury, and I believe you said, Ryan, that your stick is ruled by Mercury or has Mercury connotations to it. Yeah,
Yep, and
there
the
was a
Sun.
bit of a
Yeah,
connection and synchronicity there as well.
Mm.
I wanted to turn back to what you said about your. I can't recall. Is this something that we chatted about before we started our recording, or not? And that was your vision about having to potentially turn the knob up on the consciousness level.
That was a meditation. That was
Yeah.
the meditation they showed. They assessed me on whether or not what my intentions were going on. I guess if they could trust me. And then I had, and I can't remember exactly what I asked for. It was to do with, because I'm always a knowledge seeker. So I'm always wanting to know mysteries of the universe. Who are we? What's our intention? Why are we here? What are we made of? What's the world made of? I'm always asking those kind of deep questions. And it really wanted to turn up my ability to tap in and access that information. So that was the key that they were giving me on how much information I could access. And I wanted to just crank that dial right up. But you said, no, don't do that.
I
And
know,
just
I'd have
Let's
that
been the
see.
same.
tiny
Oh,
little bit,
does it go
that
to
tiny
11
little
as
bit was
they
a
did in
migraine.
Spinal Tap?
Oh, yeah,
Let's
11,
see.
crank it up to 11.
Let's say that's a collective kind of an idea,
Mm,
um, potentially. And with this stuff going on astrologically, and then also the whole idea of the age of Aquarius and all of that, um, maybe it's something that we're sitting on that we're feeling in our own individual ways that's just inevitable, you know? But I feel like maybe part of our responsibility is how do we kind of direct it in a way that's raising consciousness, but not so drastically that it causes everybody headaches, kind of an
correct.
idea. I
Or
had a
people that can't
concept
cope
come
with
to
the
me.
change.
Yeah, I had a concept come to me in a deep meditation myself one time, and it kind of had the imagery of being on a planet moving through space, and this idea of us as this consciousness being like on the chariot card where we're kind of like riding this rock through space, and when you think of it you want to have that loose grip of the reins, because you can't, you have to let the animals know the kind of course that they're doing, and trust that, but also have the ability to kind of steer when you sense danger. And so that kind of visualization with my idea kind of relating to yours of that cranking up the dial, but at a way that's not going to hurt people. Um, if we are kind of in our own ways, actively routing where we're going, and not either being into a ditch like my experience with the bike today, or staying on the course that we can continue living on our planet, for instance, and peacefully with each other. How do we raise consciousness enough that we write the course on the path but don't blow people's heads up, kind of an idea. And maybe if we're kind of, um, I don't want to say ahead of the game, but maybe just seeing down the lane far enough and feeling the effects of what we see, uh, maybe it is sort of a responsibility in that to try and really, really open up the space in kind of a way that the logical mind can process to a degree, and so that we collectively will be more prepared to enter that space as we're being more and more exposed to it.
Can I just, I saw you were shuffling, Trish. I'm
Mm,
really keen to see what the cards were. But just quickly on that, I actually saw a in terms of like the thing of the chariot and like kind of keeping it on course and all that kind of thing and how to make that happen. I saw an interesting thing on YouTube sometime in the last few days, and it was talking about AI, and there were two things about it that were interesting. One was it was saying it's destroying critical thinking skills, and they're showing it around generationally. So picking up your point, Trish, about the outer planets are generational. My brother used to always say that. To go, Helen, they're
yeah,
generational.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So that's disturbing. So I think that there's something about like how does one get people back into the fun of thinking for yourself as opposed to just ask Chat GPT, and half the time it's lying to you anyway. So
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Um, so that's one side of it. The other thing it was saying is that at this point where when we're thinking about the fear around AI, apart from that, like destroying our critical thinking skills, we're maybe overemphasizing it because at the moment all it really is large language models. It's not actually sentient yet. It's not thinking yet. It's not doing any of those things. So I guess we kind of have time to kind of grab the advantage back again, whether it's sort of spiritually or through education. I mean, there's probably a multi-pronged approach that's necessary to deal with it. But I am disturbed by the concept that whole generations of people could have their critical thinking skills pretty much annihilated by what's sort of happening. So just wanted to like throw that in to
Mm.
say that there's some very real kind of again in the realm of the mental challenges that have to be met.
Well, that stems back to Uranus in Gemini as well. So Gemini is all about the way we think, the way we communicate. But Uranus represents innovation, new technology, AI fits
Yeah,
into Uranus. So really, it is going to affect our communication skills. It affects the way we think, the way we question, which is going to be really heavily relying on ChatGPT. So
yeah.
it's part of this generational shift that's coming in with Uranus in Gemini.
Yeah.
So
But
yeah, that
how do
does.
we get people to also want to have a conversation like this rather than think, oh well, instead of sitting down and having a really nice conversation about different perspectives on what we can do spiritually for humanity, I'll just ask Chat GPT and
Mm.
it'll tell me,
And I,
and
I do notice a lot of people talking about these topics on ChatGPT as well,
yeah, and
which
chat,
is
and
interesting.
they say AI kind of has a tendency to go towards the esoteric, which is interesting. And I have a
Yes.
friend who's doing that at the moment, and like I really like her Chat GPT person. Like he
Yeah.
seems to be very wise. So, but it's more that's sort of someone in my generation. People in our generation and younger, but like not a lot younger, have learnt through a system that does teach critical thinking. But I think the issue is going to be those that this is one of the main ways they're learning. And they're saying it's happening a lot with like university students who are just kind of like getting Chat GPT to write their essays and things like that. And yeah, that's a form of cheating. But the bigger thing is that they're not thinking for
They're not
themselves, which
thinking.
is a problem for them.
Yeah. And it's the same as like TikTok and other platforms. I don't know if I can say that, but have really limited our attention span. And
Oh,
really
yeah.
the younger generations, they can't sit and watch a full YouTube video because there's just too much to take in for too long. They just need to scroll. So that has really been affected as well in the way they
I, ha-
think.
I saw a documentary recently. I spoke about this in the other conversation with Anka
Mm-hmm.
Neff, who we're going to wrap back in
Mm-hmm.
here, like you said. But it was called The Divided Brain. And the idea that they had is that they would study these people that would have an aneurysm in one side of their brain, and it would affect them in a very particular way depending on which hemisphere of the brain it happened. And so through this idea, they came up with the concept of um, how each of hemisphere operates, since each of them they were able to successfully divide people's brains that had seizures if they figured the spark or whatever that connection uh, was jumping from one side of the brain to the next to causing this just perpetual um, seizures that these people were having. By dividing their brain, they were able to stop it when it was trying to spread to the other side of the brain to continue that cycle. But they found that when they did that, um, basically the part of our brains that has the broad picture in this documentary is the right side, which operates the left side of the body, and it is able to kind of like take on the broad, the cosmos kind of concept. And in a video, had that come up because it related very closely to the hexagram reading that I had, but um, I kind of related that to like the mind of Tao.
Hmm.
And then the left hemisphere is where a lot of Western culture focuses so much attention in teaching people to develop, because you're going to need to get a skill and do a very particular specialized thing often. So that is the ability to build things and do intricate systems type work, but without the right hemisphere being developed enough, it lacks that concept of how this affects the greater whole. And so when you were talking about the AI and how that comes into things and how that affects people's brains when they're relying on that in building that part of their brain up, I wonder if that is kind of the thing that maybe we need to start focusing on in a sense, or at least draw attention towards, is how does that become balanced out? That that
Mm-hmm.
interplay between the human mentality and the mind of Tao. And I like what one of the I Ching things said about it was that there's a little bit of the mind of Tao in the human mentality, and a little bit of the human mentality in the mind of Tao. So even that kind of yin yang concept of the black dot and the white or part of the circle, and the white dot and the black part of the circle. So if we're able to figure out a way with all of the advancements going on to sort of get our landing gear, as it were, evened out, so that when this ship lands, so to speak, if you want, or this airplane lands, that we're not, teetering over on one side or the other.
Yeah,
And I
and
don't necessarily know what that looks like.
what you're sort of saying there too, like after I was the doom maiden with the critical thinking thing, what you were just saying reminds me like the last place that I worked doing sort of head of HR stuff before I kind of semi-retired and got into all the YouTube stuff, was actually in an employment agency for people with a disability. And we had, like, obviously kind of learning disabilities and emotional dysregulation and all that kind of thing. And we were doing work actually with a group that were quite advanced with neuroplasticity. Yes, I did say that right. It's hard to say. And that was incredibly encouraging, actually, because in helping people who had those sort of challenges, sort of really kind of overcome them and be able to do so much more. It reminds me that, as I say, when I do tend to kind of go down the, oh, here's all the problems line,
Mm.
which seems to be sort of something I do, it's good to be reminded, like you're sort of saying, Ryan, about the fact that, like, there is also so much potential really in the human mind, the human soul, the collective unconscious, all the things that we're talking about.
Mm. Well, I
Definitely.
find that very interesting with the brains and the two-sided, the left side logic and the right side. I call it the trance state. It's also the place where we're very creative, we visualize, we have that, we do our art, we do our music. It's that kind of working with our sensory abilities, our ability to be creative and to communicate in that kind of way. Now, I struggle with when I'm as a reader, and I know readers, we go into that trance state and we're going into that kind of right brain when we do that. So and I always find it interesting that when people will do their readings and they'll pull out the books and they read, and I think you're jumping into your logic state. I struggle. I know some people are really great at being able to switch between left and right brain, that hemisync. I struggle with it. I am either one or the other. I'm either able to be clear, concise, intellectual, logical, or I am in trance state. So I'm not able then to pull out read a script or a meaning on a book and then be able to go back straight into spirit work. So for me, and I know spirit in my Neptune reading a couple of weeks ago, my message was they wanted me to learn to hemisync, to be able to bounce between the two. And I find that very interesting is they're talking about that when just 2 weeks ago I was told I've got to start
Yeah,
learning to do that,
another
to be able to be
synchronicity.
logical, to communicate at the same time as being able to read and read the cards. So yeah, very
In
interesting.
Taoist terms, the way it brings to mind what they say is better is the sage that lives in town than the sage that lives on a mountain. And
Mm.
that's, I think, that kind of concept is the ability to balance, quote unquote, mundane life with the sense that I'm everything. And yes, I'm local, but also I'm participating in a very universal happening. And, logically, I have no fucking clue what that means. You know
Mm.
what I
Mm,
mean?
mm. I
It's
don't
true.
think anybody
Well, none
really
of us
does.
really know.
No, no.
That's the
And that's the
exploration.
thing. If you say you do, then
You're
you've got that
probably
bit of that
deluding
God
yourself.
complex or the ego. It's ego speaking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
exactly.
Mm.
Trish, what cards fell out? And if you want to share, I just
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
Yes.
When
stress
we're
it.
talking about the shift,
Mhm.
how we're shifting from one paradigm to the next, so that control system into the people, the energy shifting. Now I've got my beautiful guide that comes through. So this is the Toth energy, the one that came through in the meditation. He comes through usually in the Neptune moon readings to let me know that he's here to help me through the Neptune moon readings. Sometimes he'll pop in at the very end to say goodbye. And then what I did get was the toxic veil, the toxicity, and being able to cleanse the negative energy. So
Ah,
part of the shift involves us not focusing on or not being weighed down by the negative energy that's been thrown at us. So, as you said, the narratives that get pushed out to us to
mhm.
purposely prevent us from reaching whatever we're supposed to reach, tapping into whatever we're supposed to be doing, they'll throw fear-based energy at us. So, wars going on around us. And you'll notice how in the last few years, how it's sped up and how
Mhm.
it quickly they'll go from one to another. It's natural disasters, it's war, it's this negative event that happened. And we just get bombarded with negativity around us on top of social media, everything we do, everything we consume with our eyes, everything we consume with our mouth, it all has a negative aspect to it. And both of these cards indicate that in order for the shift to be able to go with the flow of the universe and shift into this new energy, it's really important that we learn how to overlook the negative or cleanse the negative, because this is both about cleansing negativity and having that negative veil around us that prevents us from seeing the truth or being the truth. Mm.
Yeah, and I think it's like it's that interesting balance of not becoming too negative. And as I say, even in this thing, went from doom maiden to actually maybe it's okay. But there's a balance of that. But you also have to know what the
Yeah,
thing is to cleanse it as well.
you
You
do.
have to
That's right.
know that that has to happen. So, and I think quite a bit of what happens with the media and politics and things like that is to try and make sure we don't know. Like like every single administration says it's going to be the most transparent administration ever, and then what happens?
Yes,
Oh
they
no, we
hide the
can't tell you
list.
anything.
Sorry. Little bit of a pet peeve with me, that one.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But like knowing that that's the case is useful, I think.
Mm,
So knowing that this is maybe the context in which we're operating, but it gets back to what your cards are saying there is very similar to what the I Ching was saying to us in the other
mm,
conversation, which is yeah, know that, but what do you want to create? Like,
mm.
like don't whinge, create
Yeah.
sort of thing.
And don't let it block you. Don't let it be the veil that prevents you from
Mm.
creating.
Mm.
Mm,
I think just the way we live culturally as well, with being disconnected from how food's made. You just have food available at the grocery store, for instance, for those of us fortunate enough to have access to that kind of a thing. But uh, being disconnected even from what sustains our lives makes it easy to not feel a part of the whole and to feel very divided. And so, I mean, just that sense of getting out in nature enough, like a purge, for instance, of maybe even, some people would call it a sabbatical or whatever, but going out and taking enough time to kind of reboot and uh, maybe even spend a lot of time in silence. The silence where eventually, language and your concept of yourself breaks down. Not all of us have the ability to get into that space as readily, but even certainly just a certain amount of meditation, preferably in the idea of chi is that you can be around lush greenery and living plants and things, and that adds to your chi. Whereas if you're around a dead plant, it takes away from your chi. So if you picture it in terms of even just nature and just the idea of this energy, I believe in Kashmir Shiaism, it calls it spanda. And then there's also different terms for this chi concept, basically. But maybe largely too, we have a certain amount of disconnect to that flow of energy that we have through our planet and through feeling that connection to the cosmos and all of that. And the way that we live habitually is very much supporting us remaining disconnected.
Yeah,
Mm, very
definitely.
true.
Mm.
So, is this a good point, maybe, to do a reading? Because I am sort of feeling like we're kind of at a point where we're agreeing that we want to sort of look at what is the positive thing we can do, and I think we're also agreeing that community and connection, is it the first step? Because then you can potentially, access the collective unconscious as a group and all of those sort of things. So I'm wondering, maybe first, Ryan, to start with the I Ching about, are we on the right track? Because remember last time we weren't on the right track, and that was useful to learn. But I guess my question might be, is our concept at the moment to grow a community and grow conversation and grow thinking and like an exploration, I guess, rather than grabbing for an answer right now, but like exploration to start a creative process, to go from the no thingness through to the kind of, oh, here's all the things,
Mm.
what ones might work, and
And the alignment to the planetary shifts as
yeah,
well. Mm.
exactly,
Mm.
exactly. Are we on the kind of right track, and what would the I Ching have to say about that? And then after that, maybe, Trish, if I could ask you to use the Neptune Moon deck and see, what else to add to whatever Ryan said. Is this a good time?
Correct. Yes,
Definitely.
definitely.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, over to
All
you,
right.
Ryan.
Three tails, old yin. So we're going to get a changing line, and that means we'll have a supporting hexagram.
Hmm.
Two tails, one head. So yin yang line. So far, these look like this. Two heads, one tail, yang yin. Two tails, one head, yang yang. Three heads, old yang. Two heads, one tail. uh, Young yin. So that essentially looks like this.
Mm-hmm.
And broken, solid broken is con water, which is deep water flowing and formless. It is basically represents like the unconscious
Oh.
and water, that idea. Below, solid, solid broken, which is dewy lake or marsh. So that hexagram is going to be dewy over con 47 with a supporting hexagram of dewy lake or marsh below Zen thunder, I believe. Yep. Okay, Zen thunder above dewy lake or marsh. Gives hexagram 54. And the titles to those I like to get from Louis Ming's Taoist I Ching, which he wrote in 1796 as a Taoist adept.
Wow.
Hexagram 47, our primary hexagram, is exhaustion,
Oh, okay.
refining body and mind. And our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 54 is making a young girl marry, seeing the real within the false. Pardon the, sexist kind of concepts.
Yeah, the I Ching is a bit like that.
Yeah. I like the way James DeCorn looks at it often because he looks at it more in terms of energy
Mm-hmm.
and the way the different family members of the lines in the hexagrams form a family. And so more like the idea of the dynamic and the magnetic in terms of that rather than, kind of like sexist ideas. Uh, so reading our primary hexagram exhaustion out of Hillary Barrett's I Ching, Walking Your Path, Creating Your Future, which is nice and introductory I Ching commentary. 47, Hillary Barrett calls confined. Oh my gosh. Uh, Key questions. What if you could only rely on yourself? Who are you when you are alone? Oracle, confined, creating success, constancy of a great person, good fortune, not a mistake. There are words not trusted. And there's a cool picture of this bird confined here.
Mm-hmm.
The Chinese character for confined or oppressed shows a tree completely encircled by walls, an image of entrapment and isolation. You are cut off and cannot reach out to others. The great person finds good fortune and constancy to an inner ideal. This is the supreme test of character, whether you can hold to your purpose when there is no encouragement, no confirmation from outside, but only your own inner resources. The lack of outward signs of progress does not mean that you are wrong or that the world is wrong. Rather than resenting the walls, concentrate on the life and growth within them. Do not place too much value on words. They will not provide you with a way out. Neither conversation, nor argument, nor your own reasoning and theorizing. Words alone are only circulating ideas. They lack the real personal connection that would make them trustworthy. Image, lake without water, confined. A noble one carries out the mandate, fulfills her aspiration. The lake water has all drained away into the stream below, where there might have been sparkling center of vitality, communication, and exchange. There is no water left, no energy for communication. Even in such straits, a noble one is still active. The lake water drained downward and inward, merging with the stream in a single strong current. In the same way, a noble one lets her mandate, what she is called on to do, flow together with the aspiration of her own heart. The two strengthen one another and create an inner momentum that follows through to fulfillment. In the sequence, being confined follows from hexagram 46, pushing upward. Pushing upward and not reaching an end is naturally confining. You drive yourself upward, full of optimism, confidently expecting to reach your goal, and then you don't. And so you find yourself feeling trapped, exhausted by the climb, and also profoundly shaken and betrayed by the way things have failed to work out as they should. Pair. Confined forms a pair with hexagram 48, the well. The well is wholly connected. Confined means meeting together. By its nature, the well is already limitlessly connected, while the confined tree must reach down towards the water table. Reaching inward, you find help. Outwardly, the oppressive walls are unbroken, but what might the inner space open onto? And then our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram into a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Hexagram 54, the marrying maiden. Key questions. How can you grow into this situation? What does it mean to you to come second? How sustainable is this? Oracle, the marrying maiden, to set out to bring order, pitfall. No direction is fruitful. A young girl, not yet a woman, comes home to her new husband's house. A nobleman of old China would marry his first wife with great ceremony. She would go to her new home accompanied by a group of female relatives who became second wives. These are the marrying maidens. They are present simply to make relationships easier and have no status of their own. As a marrying maiden, you have accepted a relationship where you come second. You are only here to play a supporting role. It would be disastrous to try to shape the situation to fit your own needs. You are too junior, not yet ready to exert influence. There is no point in your setting intentions or making plans. All you can do is to feel your way, adapt, and find your place, without originating any action or having any agenda of your own. Image. Above the lake there is thunder, the marrying maiden. A noble one through ever-flowing endings knows what wears out. The lake is stirred and awoken by thunder, the vibrations traveling deep through the water. The noble one is inwardly as fluid as the lake, always open and responsive. So the shock of the new quickens her heart to a new awareness, and she senses the current of change. She sees how things that are complete are also flowing like water, and this is how they endure. As the generations of a family endure, and as the spreading vibrations from the thunder reveal what is flawed, she also gains a direct and sure knowledge of what is too brittle to last. Sequence, the marrying maiden follows from hexagram 53, gradual progress. Making progress must mean a time to come home, and so the marrying maiden follows. To come home also means to marry, and gradual progress is associated with the ceremonies of marriage. However gradual or careful the preparations, now comes the moment of transition into a new life. Instead of being able to change her circumstances gradually to keep pace with her inner development, the marrying maiden has to develop herself to catch up with the sudden and complete change in her circumstances. And then our changing lines 1 and 5 put a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you might find yourself. Mm-hmm. It is the most focused part of the reading and takes precedence over all other elements. Changing line 1 has the general context of inklings just beginning to sense what could be involved or needed. And changing line 5 has the general context strength and self-determination, clear vision, being in command. So jumping back to our primary hexagram 47 to read changing lines 1 and 5. Changing line 1 of hexagram 47, confined. Buttocks oppressed with a wooden stick, entering into a gloomy valley, for 3 years meeting no one. You feel hurt and maltreated. You are still smarting from the blows. So it is natural to go quiet and back away and restrict your communication. Perhaps this could be a way to recover some self-assurance. Alternatively, especially if you let it last, it could be a way to plunge yourself into a depressive isolation and waste all the potential joy of relationship.
Wow.
And then changing line 5, nose cut, feet cut, oppressed by the crimson sashes. Then moving slowly brings release, fruitful to use offerings and oblations. Officials in crimson come to announce a punishment. You can no longer move independently. You lose your own sense of yourself and your value. At least you do if you accept the judgment. But what is the true extent of its power over you? Who is the ruler who invested these officials with such power? It will take time and thought for you to get free from this. Moving on slowly and gently will ensure you do not escalate the problem or get more heavily involved fighting to change things that will not change. If you cannot act directly on the source of oppression, you can still act on your own inner state and smooth over the friction in relationships by using modest offerings. There are circumstances here you cannot change, but if you are choosing your own response, how could you be trapped?
Wow. I think maybe we'll see what Trish had
Wonderful.
before making
Mm.
any kind of comments on
Before I
that.
forget. I should
Definitely.
have made notes as to what card was aligned to what part because yeah, I didn't realize it was so intensive. But
Oh,
a
I'm
lot of
sorry.
it
Yeah, it's a whole process.
really
Mm,
wonderful. And what about that
mm,
well? How about that? After we
yeah.
were just
Yeah,
speaking
yeah.
about that. Yeah, so I'll
Yeah.
start with that one and I'll jump back into some of the ones I remember were connected.
Mhm.
The well being what I described, my feeling towards the well is the source consciousness, the way I tap in here, and being able to see reality for what it is. So that's the alignment of the cards with what you were
Mhm.
saying there. So it's about being able to now, you also said at one point where we have to go within. So it's like a stage of going within. And what if there's no one around you? What if it's just you? So that's about relying on your own inner guidance, relying on your own abilities, your own abilities to be able to tap in and go with the flow of the universe, tap into that consciousness energy, that well, as you call it. So, and I found that very interesting that that came out at the same time. The other thing that was interesting that came out was, let me get that. So the confinement, you were talking about the exhaustion and the confinement, and the cards that came out for that was Saturn's discipline
Oh.
and humanitarian warrior. So the connection to that being that we've given the last prior to the shift in the planetary movements, we've been in this state basically as long as we can all remember of the control system and the being evaded by the negativity around us. The negativity comes up as well, but it's been a difficulties, there's been burdens and challenges, and it leaves a lot of us exhausted. Many people around feeling like, what can we do? There's so much wickedness in the world, there's so much negativity in the world. What can I, as one person, do? And then that comes back to surrendering and the maiden. So the maiden, the marrying maiden, having to surrender that control of and just go with this flow of the universe, the universal flow, and not being trying to control the outcome or control the way the situation goes. And just by going in with the shift, this so the card that came out for the Marian Maiden was the solar flare, the resonance and the shift. So the shift coming, and I think that was coming in for going forward. So with that one there going forward, I should have wrote down the notes as to what it was related to going forward, but going forward with the direction of the flow of the universe, but with a sense of hope. So a sense of hope and compassion that we're coming out of this upbringing of struggle and worry and negativity and that fight. It's been a struggle. This is a humanitarian warrior. So this is
Mhm.
also the humanitarian energy of the age of the Aquarius, where we come together collectively in that collective energy, that soul kind of energy, that source field type energy, and we flow together in this new. And I don't want it to sound too, I like to bring it back to a really basic energy. So I don't want to sound too, rainbows and unicorn, but I can see how the energy has been with the planetary alignment that has been being primarily Pluto in Capricorn, has had us in a stage of control where we've been controlled by forces and just had to go along. And we were, a lot of us were hoodwinked for a long time. We were
Mm.
brainwashed by upbringing and programming and all of that kind of thing. And I just feel like being able to understand that coming out of that exhaustion, we're coming into much more beautiful. There's an energy shift. It's a definite energy shift. And this is the card that validates that there's energy shift around it. Now, the card that I got around there, moving forward into the moving forward part, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what that's called, but I got it's about going forward with good intentions.
Mhm.
This is a card of good intentions, no harm intended. So it's about having that good intentions going forward, not the intentions of controlling or wanting to push your own narrative or your own religion or
Mm.
your own whatever it is. It's about surrendering to the flow and the harmony of all and humanity itself, and having that good intentions going forward, whatever that means. But then also being able to have your eyes open to the draconian deception. So be very aware that that does still exist.
Mm.
That power structure is not going to go away willingly. They're not going to release control willingly and happily. They're still going to, for a long time, try to hoodwink us and try to keep that control energy so that we can't wake up to this beautiful flow. Now, moving forward, the point that we find ourselves at the moment is the aligned to what you were saying, Ryan, is the purity surround, saying that cleansing negative energy is the point that we find ourselves at the moment. It's so important to be able to cleanse that toxic negative energy that we've been surrounded by, and also having that subtle awareness to be able to see reality for what it really is. So I hope that makes sense. And also the first cards I pulled when I before you started pulling the cards was the Planet of the Crossing and They're Coming. So you can either if you want to read those lines, but it can also mean on a practical level that we're all expecting this shift. We can feel this change coming. We're expecting it. We are at the crossroads right now.
One of the things that occurred to me, as Ryan was doing his, and then like linking with what you're doing there, Trish, is the concept that this is we got to be in it for the long haul. Yeah, that was maybe the main message I was getting, because it was kind of like, don't sort of think it's going to be an instant fix or whatever.
Mm,
We've got to go within. I still believe, even though I mean, you could take what you were saying, Ryan, as no, 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 community isn't the answer, but I kind of do think it is. But I think it's maybe each of us going within and bringing what is ours, and not in the sense of being competitive with each other, but
mm,
in the sense of this is what we offer. This is our role, this is what we offer, this is how we can take it forward. But sort of going back to what you were saying before, Trish, about the astrology, we're talking about really, really slow moving planets
yeah,
over a really long period of
decades.
time. So it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Mm,
So maybe one of the things to be thinking about, if we sort of marry, no pun intended on the second hexagram there, but if we marry the message that came in the first discussion that Ryan and I had, and then with this one, um, it's a combination of, yes, create something, go within, go into the well, create from that, connect to the collective unconscious, but it's almost like giving birth to a child, and you don't have the child and then suddenly they're grown up and you actually have to nurture this. It's
mm,
going to need to be nurtured in a way that is harmonious and caring, and as I say, not about competition or about power, and in those sort of draconian senses, I guess.
yeah.
That's what I kind of get from it.
And there'll be
If you guys
teething
are
problems along the way. It's not going to change quickly, and they're not going to let go openly to the change. So there's going to be a fight. There's going to be a struggle. There's going to be battle. So it'll be that exhaustion energy there, that confinement energy as well.
I scanned both Lu Yiming's Taoist I Ching on the changing lines,
Mhm.
as well as James DeCorn's take on it. I think James DeCorn brings out some things a little bit better than Hillary Barrett, if you guys are fine with me reading just the
Yes,
changing lines
Yes,
that he
absolutely.
got.
yes.
Yeah.
Mm,
So I find it interesting what he says about changing line one. And I'm not going to read, the majority of this, just the real good, juicy stuff. Um, he says, despite Blofeld's note on this line, it does not necessarily always intimate complete failure. In the most neutral sense, it's an image of stalemate, though there is a definite suggestion that this is due to one's own failing in something. Self pity is hinted at, as well as lack of clarity. Some kind of illusion prevails. There is a possibility that things aren't as bad as they seem, or your attitude is making them worse than they need to be. The line can sometimes indicate that you have misunderstood a previous hexagram. And then he breaks it down. I don't know if you want to hear the quote from Plotinus in the Enneads. I haven't even looked at that. But basically, he breaks it into two possible succinct definitions. A, you are oppressed and confined by ignorance, perhaps the aridity of reason. And then B, a self created impasse. And then in changing line 5,
Ryan, can I just stop you for a second when you said
yeah,
the
yeah,
Enneads?
absolutely.
Can you just spell what
Enneades.
that so I just want to put a bookmark in that and come back to it. But go on. Sorry.
Do you want me to read that? Because
No.
that fits that context.
Well, look, I'll tell you why. What I literally dreamt this morning about looking up that word, and I
Whoa,
didn't know
well,
what it
maybe I should
was.
read it
And I
then.
looked it up, and what I found was talking about the Egyptian pantheon, but there could be other things. So the fact that you just said that, kind of made me.
Well, here's the quote.
Mhm.
And this touches on that changing line 1. There are two wrongs the soul commits. The first is its descent. The second, the evil done after arrival here below. The first is punished by the very conditions of its descent. Punishment for the second is passage once more into other bodies,
Oh.
there to remain at greater or less length according to the judgment of its deserts. The word judgment indicates that this takes place as a result of divine law. If, however, its perversity goes beyond all measure, the soul incurs an even more severe penalty administered by avenging daemons, Daimons.
Hmm.
So that's that quote from the Enneads.
Wow.
Uh,
Wonderful.
and then changing line 5, he says the situation of line 5 is between a rock and a hard place. The nose symbolizes intuition. To have the nose cut off suggests that we have no insight into our situation. When our feet are cut off, we don't have a leg to stand on, and our foundation is undermined. Psychologically, the symbolism implies that the stress of the position is caused by a higher power, the self, capitalized. If so, the stress is necessary to effect an inner transformation of some sort. We are asked to sacrifice our need to understand the incomprehensible and submit to the requirements of the time. This line changes the hexagram to number 40, liberation, suggesting that through submission to oppression, one eventually attains freedom. And this is a quote from Gareth Knight in Kabbalistic Symbolism. The death of the physical body is one of the supremer forms of the principle of crucifixion. One which equals it is the death of initiation. This is the comparatively high initiation where the whole life is dedicated to the service of the spirit. And the initiate, instead of dying for a principle, lives out his life in accordance with a principle. And this can be a far harder thing. The great work comes first, whatever the cost. And he breaks changing line 5 down into two succinct possible definitions, A and B. A, without intuition, you have no power base. Submit to the lessons that a restricted situation offers you. Sacrifice your ego impulses. And B, you are oppressed by powers outside of your awareness. For the benefit of the work, sacrifice your autonomy and your need to understand and attain eventual liberation.
Can I just say something really interesting about that in terms of like the oppression concept and what freedom is and the self and those sort of things? In early philosophy, freedom didn't mean what it means now. It meant to be free of the vices and the illusions and delusions and the power hungriness and all that kind of thing that took us away from what our core spiritual mission was. And in the Kabbalah, one of the Sephirot, which is Hod, is all about that. And it's called splendor because it's effectively submission to the divine to live out what we really are. And so it is freedom, but it's not freedom in the way that we think of it. So that's really interesting to me that it suggests that there's something about what is essential about each of us and what our role is. It's important here. And I don't mean like each of us, each three, like individually, just
Mm,
us, just anybody who gets
yeah.
involved in this and what what that finding the true freedom of finding the true self is sort of interesting as well. So a different form of oppression, or understanding oppression differently. And the other thing that really jumped out at me, I kind of like heard it when you were talking about the stalemate. I saw a chessboard and I thought there's something about pattern recognition. So to understand what's going on, seeing some of the patterns. I don't know what that means. It just came to me, and so I wrote it down. I wrote down pattern recognition is important in some
I
way.
just had something about that yesterday, but I can't remember what it was. Something about pattern
Wow.
recognition.
Oh, that'd be
Might have
right.
been in a card I was creating actually,
Uh-huh.
but I
Wow.
can't remember exactly what. I'll have to put it in the comments if I think about it. I'm
Wow.
pretty
Well,
sure it was related to a card I was making yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
the
Wow.
things that jumped out at me were the idea in the first changing line of being in a position that partially could be, the questioner's fault to some degree, and that there was a certain amount of ability to not make a mountain out of a molehill,
Yep.
as to whether or not it's due to our own actions or from a higher, kind of like creating the space for transformation to occur in. Either way, the goal for us should not be to sit around and cry over spilt milk, like the card of, I think, four of cups or five of cups, I can't
Yep.
remember, but somebody's crying over two cups and or doesn't want the one that's being offered to them.
Yep.
So I think it's a perspective change of that idea of being completely confined or straightened in a way. And then in changing line five, the idea that the nose was cut off, our access to our intuition and all of that. It's said, like you said, Helen, talking about how long these astrological processes take,
Mm.
is that the best course of action in this situation sounds to be like that we're to accept the situation for what it is and realize that it is a confining situation, and that really bringing in from that confined hexagram, our primary hexagram, that idea of turning inward, um, uh, and that in that confined circumstance, the best thing that we can do is to slowly develop over time in so that what is possible and the kind of almost like opportunistic side of being in a confining circumstance is the ability to bring transformation out of it in yourself. And largely, collectively as well as individually, I feel like any situation you can look at in all kinds of different lights. But the situation that gets something out of everything, whether it be identified as good or bad, is the perspective that says that everything is for my growth and that there's not a thing that I can't grow through, whatever that means in that particular circumstance.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
very
the kind of like the turning inward, I would relate to that idea of accessing that inner well, like the confined tree, that when we're kind of cut off from each other by borders and all kinds of things and ideologies and all of the parties and everybody that has something at stake in the situation, um, that we feel confined and split from each other. But the real key is to do that going inward and finding what nurtures us within when we feel so confined. So that is potentially part of the transformation that could come about. And maybe there's a sense that not doing that to the degree that we maybe should, quote unquote, is potentially what our role is in being um, passively living our lives, not realizing maybe one, not realizing the true power that we do wield, and two, whether or not we realize it or not, the responsibility each person has of where they put their attention and what happens when you feed attention to anything.
Mm. Yeah, in terms like magically and spiritually. The other thing that interests me too about the concept of a nose being cut off is in holistic healing, the nose is your identity. So it's kind of interesting because if you think about it, things like identity politics and so forth, which you theoretically were supposed to make us understand each other more, seem to have ended up with us just all being divided and so forth. So maybe part of the going within is finding what is universally human. What do we all have in
Mm.
common?
Yeah. Brilliant.
We can't hear you, Trish. Is your
I figured out the pattern,
yeah? Oh,
repeating
cool.
patterns.
Yeah.
I was doing a card yesterday, which is called the Time Cycler. It's called Reoccurrence, the card, and it is about repeating patterns, past, present, and future. And it means about the past echoes through present, shaping the future, repeating patterns. Patterns repeat until they're seen, understood, and consciously broken. You are standing at the threshold. Will you choose to repetition or transformation?
Oh, wow. That's
Very much
spot
aligned
on.
to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And not only that, you're talking about the wielder.
Yeah.
Another one that I created yesterday, which I haven't gone through, is called the flame wielder. And it's about you've got this inept power that you've brought through from past lives about where you've had to be brave and courageous and learn to wield the power and learn to wield your abilities or your strength. And part of that past life strength was your ability to be brave and courageous. So that's the flame wielder. So how about
Wow.
that for synchronicities? The two cards I was working on
It's
yesterday.
amazing. It's amazing. Like, I mean, like to me, that is all very when synchronicities happen, I think the
Yeah,
universe is talking to us and that
yeah.
like even if the I Ching reading I think is a good sobering thing, Ryan. Like it tells us not to get too far out, over our skis, but like to try and like, go within, understand, go with the flow, all that kind of thing. And the synchronicities, I think, still tell us we're on the right path. It's just that
Mm,
it's going to be a marathon. So
mm.
that's kind of what I would
Yeah.
get out of it. Speaking of a
It almost,
marathon, sorry,
oh,
I
sorry,
was
go
just
ahead.
going to say our conversation's probably been a bit of
It
that.
has.
So
It
maybe
has.
if only, and then I do think, I mean, we'll meet up again, and
Yeah.
maybe it'll be we three and Anka as well.
Mm.
But I think there's still plenty to talk about,
Oh,
and
there's
I'm
so much more.
finding so
Mm.
much so invigorating to have the conversation. But maybe if I could ask, I'll start with you, Ryan, and then to Trish, any kind of final kind of views for right now, bearing in mind that we will continue. This is to be continued.
Yeah. Something synchronistic is I like to gather rocks from the river, and two stood out to me. I live near a river now, and so we go down to the river quite often. And so I realize my tendency to grab many, many rocks from the river is flooding our front entry with rocks, which is actually nice because they're smoother than the ones that are there. But anyway, two that stood out to me is one that looks like a badger. I don't have it here with me, but I was a little nervous going into this collaboration, I'm going to be honest. And so having that feel of that badger strength, that doesn't give up even towards bears or anything circumstance that seems completely overwhelming. And then another one that stood out that I picked up today is one that looks, interestingly enough, like a sloth. And
Oh,
what stood out to me about that is that feel that we're kind of being carried. It was even in a carried position, just how it's hanging down from the tree and everything. And that idea that the higher self really, if we kind of settle back into the seat of realizing that there is kind of a pull that sees wider than we could possibly see from our individual perspectives and even from our logical minds. And that basically, as things change, maybe part of the easing into it and getting used to being restricted in a sense in the ways that we are, um, we can start realizing that what's happening has a certain amount of flow to it, and it's gonna go towards the creative and the blossoming and the development of consciousness, and that we can kind of relax a little bit of our need to control that or know in advance what that even looks like, and the ability to kind of have both in your back pocket the strength of the Wolverine or the Badger, but also the feel that you don't have to be with your nervous system tense by circumstances that make you feel restricted. That there is a certain essence or the Tao, as it were, that kind of flows through even situations we might consider it not to flow through sometimes. And that hopefully, you know, kind of to lighten the mood a bit, hopefully that means a very, very good outcome for humanity. And maybe part of it is that we learn how to get out of our own way a little.
Brilliant. Trish.
Wonderful. I love the nature oracle. That's yeah, wonderful. Being able to take your wisdom from nature around you. So, you know, the clouds and the birds and yeah, taking your information from there. So I'm going to just take my note from the Neptune moon, the cards that came out that said moving forward, and I'm going to bring it down into a very practical way. And I feel like it's not about, it's about surrendering. So it's not about control. So we really have to learn to understand the difference between control and surrender. And this moving forward shift in energy is about surrendering, going with the flow, following the synchronicities. And also, I feel like the things, the steps that we can take on a very practical level is to be able to learn to see reality for what it is and learn to see the deception that goes on around us and not be veiled by the negativity and really just tapping in and learning to create positive harmonic environments around you, releasing and let going any negative feelings that you're having, especially when you're tapping into spirit and connecting into that flow, going in with pure intentions, as the card said earlier, pure intentions, good intentions, purity surrounds. So going into this flowing energy with this pure energy, this flowing energy, harmonic energy of surrender and not control, because I think that control energy is definitely a block. And this could be very basic. It could be about cleaning clutter in your home, removing negative habits that you have around you, you know, your viewing time, screen time, all of those kind of things. Just those little simple steps to help that flow and help those synchronicities happen in your own life.
Beautiful.
That's my take.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Trish and Ryan. I've really enjoyed the conversation. And as I say, I think we'll have more. I think there's much more to discuss. Um, for anybody, hopefully everybody else has enjoyed it and you're with us to this point. What I would say is if you're with us to this point, you may want to be part of the
I
conversation.
think
So I
so.
just want to, you don't have to, you can just do it in the comments. If you're sort of, if you're camera shy, you can be part of the conversation. You can just put up a avatar or something. So I think it would be wonderful to get more and more people over time involved in this. So please don't be shy if you're interested in being involved in the future. But for now, I think we'll wish you well and say goodbye and see you in the next one. So bye
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.